Beware of spoilers, you have been warned.
The Conjuring Trilogy. Starting with The Conjuring. The Conjuring films are based on the real-life Warren couple and their paranormal investigations. Of course, the films are heavily altered with dramatized events and modern effects to give us a classic horror movie, and honestly, every element is effective in making The Conjuring a classic horror film for sure. This movie was good enough to spark a whole franchise of scary movies, and for better or for worse, James Wan and his films have been the face of the horror genre for the last decade. The story itself is what pulls me in every time. I love spooky folklore in any scenario. It's why I've watched so much Ghost Adventures in my day. The haunt of this Conjuring definitely fits the vibe. Just throw in a demonic possession and mystical exorcism, and you got yourself a solid horror flick. I really gotta hand it to the whole cast, though. Their performances really made it scary. With the insanely talented Vera Farmiga at the helm, the cast brought the intensity to the experience perfectly. With effective jump scares mixed in with other scary moments, the scare factor is definitely up there and still kind of holds up. I remember being more scared of the sequel, but as I've said, the overall story is what pulled it together, as well as the environment of a quaint farmhouse in New England. Many elements make this a great Halloween feature to any spooky marathon, and I can't recommend it enough. Speaking of the sequel, The Conjuring goes to England. The first two Conjuring films do the slow build-up of the haunting very well, but there is just something about 2 that is so much scarier. I've seen this movie a few times now, and I'm still spooked. I like how the Warrens were a bit skeptical throughout the film. I believe the real quote-unquote haunting was proven to be a hoax despite some strange occurrences and coincidences. Either way, the writers took this alleged hoax and made it a real haunting story by tying it to what would eventually become the Conjuring universe. Like this whole thing with the nun. And it sort of works. What I also love about the film are the low-key, wholesome moments with the Warrens and the family. It's just definitely a good way to trick the audience into connecting with the family as they go through this traumatizing time. Once again, Vera and Patrick work great together, and all of this pulled together with an intense climax. The Conjuring sequel is pretty good. Conjuring 3, or The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. I had low expectations going in, but actually, it really isn't as bad as I thought it would be. It was like a mystery detective story starring the Warrens, and it surprisingly worked to some extent. I really respect the movie for trying to be so different from the first two. As good as the sequel was, I feel like the first film established a loose formula that the second film followed. The Devil Made Me Do It did no such thing, so it stands out a bit for this reason. Once again, I love Vera and Patrick together. They were cute. The final act was super dumb though. Honestly, I probably won't watch this again, but it was at least better than the third Annabelle movie, so I will say the film had an interesting, dare I say, political point. If we swear in the Bible in court, then the court recognizes Christianity and by extension the existence of hell, Lucifer, and Satan. Therefore, why shouldn't demonic possession be a valid defense in court? And that's checkmate on the so-called separation of church and state. Grimm. This show was on my list for a while, and I don't know why, but I've watched all of Buffy and Supernatural, and Grimm certainly fits within that genre, so here we are. Seasons 1 and 2, first impressions. Grimm is a supernatural case of the week type of show based on different aspects of mythology around the world, and heavy inspiration from, of course, the Brothers Grimm. These people, called Vesen, can shapeshift into these creatures, and shenanigans come forth when they commit crimes investigated by the Grimm, who can see who they truly are. I'll be honest, Season 1 bored me, like, for real. Concept was interesting, but I just wasn't feeling it. Nick was hot, but I just wasn't vibing with the story or characters all that much. I almost quit. but I just liked Monroe just enough. He was literally worth hanging on to. Season 2 was significantly better. I still wasn't hooked, but at least the rest of the show was finally finding its footing. The whole first and a half season is really held on the back of Monroe for me. But by the end of season 2, there was finally enough for me to stay and eventually commit to the rest of the series. Seasons 1 and 2 quarreled, so seasons 3 and 4 could fly. The next 2 seasons, this is the real show. Holy, it gets real. It really does. The lovely ladies of the show finally caught my attention. I spent the whole first 2 seasons rolling my eyes at their appearance, but I finally warmed up to them now. Rosalie, girl, I liked her from the get-go, and I totally ship her with Monroe, OTP of the show. Trouble, she ends up being one of my favorite characters as the show goes on. Season 3 saw the guest appearances of Alexis Denishoff, Buffy royalty, and one of the only good things about the Angel spinoff. It was nice to see him here, and I just wish he stuck around a little longer. The whole Diana plot, Adeline using the captain to have a baby, the whole Hex and Beast shenanigans, royal family drama, whoa, what is even happening sometimes? She gets back to Portland, and you really realize how effed up things are. It only gets worse when the captain sends Diana away. Guys, the Adeline Juliet ruse? We'll talk about that in a minute. The season 3 finale is bonkers AF. It's just this whole chaotic mess and ends up with Nick finding out he lost his grimness. This is the reason I really started paying attention to the show. It's genuinely good content, and the hype train keeps moving along all through season 4. It does not lose momentum at all. Season 4. The chaos of that last finale does not stop and continues well into the season 4 premiere. The pacing is so fast and there's just so much going on. This carries into the overall season arc, but before I lose my mind over that, I just want to shout out the KKK episode. Monroe is kidnapped and almost killed by the Besson KKK, and that episode hits hard. That was top tier. Peak of the show, very well written and acted, and the only time I got choked up watching this series. Now, season 4 is all about Juliet. In order to help Nick become Grimm again, there was this whole process of her apologizing into Adeline. Side effects include becoming a frickin' Hex and Beast. Yeah, and just when you thought it couldn't get worse, Adeline is pregnant. Again. So when she apologized to Juliet, Nick impregnated her that day, and is just, this is so effed up. No wonder Juliet is in her villain era here. I was driven to madness too. Damn. So as of now, I'm still toward the end of season 5. Season 6 has 10 episodes, so I have less than 20 episodes left of the series. Season 5 has lost momentum that seasons 3 and 4 had, and I still don't really care for some of the plot points they set up. But I am so near the end, and I still enjoy it enough to commit to seeing the end. I will say, if this is your genre of show, give it a go. It's better than Angel, but doesn't come near Buffy or Supernatural. It's still solid. The culture and lore is written nicely within this universe. The characters and actors get better and better, with Monroe, Rosalie, and Trouble being my favorites from day one. The captain was always the most interesting character to me, always being a wild card, never on the same side, so much to trust and not to trust at the same time. And Nick is just hot. Ghostwire Tokyo. First of all, the setting, as the title suggests, Tokyo. A haunted Tokyo that essentially got raptured. Everyone got Thanos and left behind their clothes. It's very eerie. The Japanese music and aesthetic is what I'm living for here. The highlight of the game, for sure. The semi-open world being such a highlight. I don't really give much thought into the main characters or plot. Akito and Keike are giving V and Johnny, like, it's whatever. Gameplay is also whatever to me. It's giving Doctor Strange Naruto, I guess. Cool upgrade system, nice use of elemental components, but again, not a highlight for me. Also, I really didn't care for main missions or side missions. Like, I just didn't care about the main stories, and there were only a handful of memorable side missions. At some point, things started to feel repetitive, and the charm of the game heavily relies on the fantastic setting. The enemy design is definitely a highlight. Slender Umbrella Man, Raincoat Kids, Headless Schoolgirls, they all creep me out. I especially love the more demonic-looking entities. I know Japanese folklore gets pretty gnarly, so no doubt some of these enemies are based on mythological creatures, and I'd love to know which ones. Other than enemy design, world design is also on its A game. A true celebration of Tokyo. The bustling city, the tranquil gardens, the iconic tourist destinations, abandoned buildings. Again, Japanese aesthetic thrives here. There are a plethora of collectibles to find, making exploration a major aspect. This is why Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom work so well, at least for me. Like, even Hogwarts Legacy, who cares about the story when I can just memorize the map of Hogwarts Castle? But yeah, exploring Tokyo is a huge selling point for me, and you can pet the dog, and you do all your shopping with spiritual cats, so... Anyways, there is definitely a niche audience for this game. If you want a game that allows you to explore an eerie yet beautiful abandoned Tokyo, this game is for you. Want much more than that? It could be hit or miss from there. But honestly, to run around the city, it would be a win for me. And again, the Japanese aesthetic is unmatched in any medium. Wes Craven is known as a pioneer in the horror genre, so it's only fair to highlight his career in this special Halloween podcast today. R.I.P. Craven was just a typical kid from Ohio. He went to college as an English and psychology major and went on to receive a master's in philosophy and writing. He immediately started off in a few teaching positions where he spent his free time filming short films on a camera he once purchased. Craven took a very big step from the educational scenery into the film industry when he got his first gigs as a pornographic film director. I guess you gotta start somewhere, right? His first real film debut was The Last House on the Left, a 1972 movie that I've definitely heard of before, so it's still talked about. Not a bad entrance to film, I suppose. It was rated R, so just a step below the X-rated content he was starting off with. But it was The Hills Have Eyes that was enough to plant the seeds to what would be a legacy in the horror genre. Wes Craven wrote and directed the film, and his true career began. And here comes the 80s. Honestly, sure, we've had some hits in modern times, but the 80s was really the foundation for the rest of all time in terms of horror and slasher films. All of our standards should be based on what the 80s horror accomplished. And, of course, all the tropes. Where do you think they came from? There are many creatives and pioneers responsible for this, and Wes Craven is one of them. Through the 80s, Craven wrote and directed Deadly Blessing, Swamp Thing, and Shocker, as well as the sequel to The Hills Have Eyes. He directed The Serpent and The Rainbow, as well as Deadly Friend. Undoubtedly, his biggest contribution to pop culture was none other than Freddy Krueger himself. Wes Craven wrote and directed Nightmare on Elm Street and was involved with the next two sequels. The first and the third are honestly among my favorite horror movies of all time, and of course the franchise kickstarted Johnny Depp's career, so just a minor bonus. Not to mention solidifying Robert Englund himself as a Hollywood legend. In the 90s, Craven wrote and directed People Under the Stairs and New Nightmare. He directed Vampire in Brooklyn and Music of the Heart. Wes Craven made yet another contribution to pop culture, Scream.
What's your favorite scary movie?
He directed the first 3 and eventually 4 Scream movies, the perfect choice to help bringing Kevin Williamson's vision to life. While Craven slowed down in the 21st century, only being a part of a handful of films and the Scream TV show, he was very much established in the Hollywood horror legacy circle. He passed away in 2015, yet he lives on through his contribution that every Halloween freak will continue to appreciate for years to come.
That's it for this week. Be sure to follow this podcast and please follow my Twitter and blog at Hollis Films to follow my journey experiencing the entertainment industry's greatest stories. And let me know what you've been fangirling over this week. Thank you for joining me, and I'll talk to you again next week.